Looking to become more creative? Well, hold on to your horses because you're about to find out exactly how. Springtime is coming here at the Myth Slayer Café, and I have with me in the house in front of some springtime greenery, Lai-DuMone. Vaughn, welcome to the Myth Slayer Café.
This is actually enough greenery. I'm trying to make a whole jungle behind me, so maybe next time there'll be more.
I think that just might tie into the conversation that we have today about creativity and genius, because we are focusing on the character from Greek myths of Daedalus.
Yes, I'm happy to bring that one to you because, as you know, I asked my son what mythological character he relates me to, and he said Medusa.
Yeah, I don't see snakes in your hair. I mean, we're talking right now. I'm not stoned yet.
Right. But, I mean, as you know, children see us in different lights than other people.
Maybe we'll have a psychotherapist on this show sometime to analyze that whole sequence. So who was Daedalus? For those of you who don't know, Daedalus was the greatest genius and inventor in all of Greek myths. He was a true creative prodigy. In Crete, a monster who happened to be the child of the queen of Crete was running rampant. This monster was the Minotaur. It was half man, half bull. It had huge fangs and a heart of stone, speaking of Medusa, and it was eating everyone left and right. So Daedalus was commissioned by the king of Crete to build a labyrinth underneath his castle to hold the Minotaur. And then there was a war between Crete and Athens. Athens lost the war, and periodically a group of young Athenian men and women were sent by boat to Crete to be stuck in this labyrinth that they could never get out of. And once they were stuck in that labyrinth, they were sacrificed to the Minotaur, who ate them alive. Eventually, one of the Athenians that came over to be a tribute sacrifice was the hero Theseus. Theseus worked with the king's daughter and Daedalus to devise a way for Theseus to figure out how to get into the labyrinth and kill the Minotaur. Essentially, it was a magic piece of yarn that Daedalus created for Theseus, and that yarn Theseus carried through the labyrinth so that once he was able to kill the Minotaur, he could simply follow the yarn thread back and escape. And then Theseus, the king's daughter, and the rest of the Athenians left the story. Daedalus and his son Icarus were tossed into the labyrinth as a punishment. While they were in their prison, Daedalus had Icarus capture some birds. And from these birds, he put together feathers that were held together by wax. And then Daedalus and Icarus found a nearby window, crawled through it, and began to fly over the ocean away from Crete and to safety. Daedalus told his son Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, otherwise the wax would melt. But Icarus, filled with excitement and a bit of arrogance, ignored his father and flew right up to the wheels of the chariot of the sun. The wax melted, and as Daedalus himself was flying through the sky, he saw his son crash into the sea below, dead. Overwhelmed with grief and guilt, Daedalus flew to the nearest island where he was safe to live out his grief. He was honored by the citizens of this island and became recognized as the greatest creative genius in all of history. And yet, his creativity had also been accompanied by pain and loss. Vaughn, why does Daedalus and his story resonate with you?
Wow, Scott, what a telling of the story. Um, so, you know, so much about Greek mythology is it just amazes me. The character of someone who's creative and curious, as you know, my work is in bringing creativity and curiosity into the workplace for leadership development, team development, and that's really what drove me to choose this one. And besides, it was better than Medusa. But so this idea of you know, having challenges and then using curiosity, using creativity to solve for these challenges. Something I often say in my work is that curiosity and creativity can help us turn challenges into opportunities.
Mm.
And and then, of course, like when you talk about the challenge of the Minotaur and trying to overcome that challenge, I I loosely started thinking about my mom's story, right? My mom's story of being a Vietnamese refugee, having to flee the war in Vietnam
Yeah.
and coming to the United States and really having to use her curiosity, her creativity to start a new life for herself and our family. Um, and eventually becoming one of the first licensed Vietnamese manicurists in the United States by following this curiosity, asking what if, and taking those small steps to create something new for herself.
That story about your mom, I'm so glad you shared that because it is a classic case of having a really big problem. I mean, there are a few problems that are bigger than being a war refugee, let's be honest, to create something that is new and that is constructive. And I might add, the nail salon space, people might trivialize it because it's about beauty and all of this sort of stuff, but it actually does involve the application of imagination. It does have an aesthetic component. It is firmly within the creative space.
Mhm.
Do you feel that someone has to have had hardship like your mom had in order to unlock their own creativity?
I don't think so. I do feel like we are all because we're all innately creative, and it comes out in different ways, right? So when I talk about creativity and teach about creativity, people often go straight to like, well, I'm not creative. I'm not a painter. I'm not an artist. I'm like, yes, but did you dress yourself today? Right? Did you solve any problems today? Do you solve any problems today? Because problem solving is creativity. Oftentimes, we have to get creative when we solve problems. I don't think that my mom would have, her and her friends would have discovered this manicure industry if there wasn't a need for it, right? If there wasn't a situation that caused me like, okay, we've lost everything. What else can we do? How are we going to survive? So it definitely is an impetus to become more creative and curious. Um, to get a little bit deeper into the story, since we're talking about it, is so my mom, Vietnamese refugee, we were brought to the United States by the U.S. military. We lived at Camp Pendleton Marine Base for a couple of months, and then were sent to a refugee integration center up in Northern California, where my mom and these 19 other women met a Hollywood movie star who was volunteering there. And the movie star was 𝗵𝗵 hedren from Alfred Hitchcock's movie The Birds.
Oh my gosh, I love her.
A great woman all around, an amazing humanitarian. And she was responsible for helping these women find a new career. She started a typing and sewing class. So she had her typing and sewing stuff out. She just set this whole class for them. But then as they were typing and sewing, they noticed her red manicured nails. And that sparked a curiosity for them. And then think about 𝗵𝗵 hedren, right? She's already started this complete program for them. She's so busy, but she paused and paid attention to that curiosity, which led them down this road of following those curiosities, following those breadcrumbs, to going to school, getting their licenses, and they all 20 of them went off around the country, started their practices, their businesses. And it was the immigrants and refugees after us who showed up and learned about the career. And it's an $8.3 billion industry now, starting from that curiosity and creativity.
And leadership, it's interesting. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the name 𝗵𝗵 hedren, as Vaughn, you mentioned a few minutes ago, there is a movie that she's very famous in called The Birds. By the way, y'all, if you like The Birds and you like 𝗵𝗵 hedren in it, please put that in the comments. I would love to hear anyone's opinion about that movie because it's one of my favorite ones ever. And in any event, the way that she's presented in that, as well as in other Alfred Hitchcock movies, is one in which I associate her with beauty and glamour and all of this sort of stuff, not necessarily humanitarianism. I mean, she doesn't play a nasty, mean character in it, but that's just not what comes through the screen. Nor would I associate it with this attention to detail or leadership. I see her as playing a role that she was cast for because she looked a certain way and had a baseline ability to act, but not a leader. And that's what this was. But when we talk about what leadership is, Vaughn, it can be easy if you are a visionary leader, or if you're just wanting to make a lot of money for your company or make sure that your division in a larger organization grows, to focus on the metrics that your organization or that you yourself are setting and not pay attention to those little details. Like Tippy noticing that the women were fascinated with her manicure jobs. Mm-hmm. How do you get people to be in a place where they are, as leaders, tapping into what I see itself as a form of creativity, looking at what's in front of you and imagining where that could take those that you lead?
As people get higher and higher up in their roles, the vision goes like this, right? Because they have to be so laser focused, and they have to be, there's a lot of responsibility, where I think that the work I do is really like taking that tunnel vision and opening it up to different perspectives. The way I go about it in the work I do is teaching this process called creative leadership. And what a creative leader is someone who, takes on some of the Daedalus characteristics, the Tippy characteristics of curiosity, of exploration and adventure and discovery. And when I talk about that in a leader point of view, is like getting curious, getting adventurous about the people around you and what their ideas are, what their perspectives are. Because that's what Tippy did, right? She's like, these are Vietnamese refugee women. She didn't have to, when you think about a hierarchy, here's a Hollywood movie star who was assigned the role of leading them to create a new career for themselves. And she already created typing and sewing. I've said that. I'm the leader. I created this program. Now all you need to do is execute. Mm-hmm. But she used her creative leadership skills and it's like, okay, let's use curiosity. Let's hear from your perspective, and let's see what else we can create together.
I can't help but wonder, as I'm listening to all of this and thinking about Daedalus, where does creativity come from? And, I've heard, it's an innate part of being human. Mm-hmm. But so what? So are all sorts of things. Creativity has uniquely equipped us to be able to survive. You say that we all have it within us, but if we're not naturally in touch with it, where is it?
Educated out of us so early on in life, right? It's educated out of us. Like when you're young, when you're a little kid, we are innately curious, we are innately creative, and we express that. And then we get educated to color within the lines, follow the rules, just answer the questions in the workbooks. So it's, again, like I feel like it's always there, but as we grow older, little bits are taken away from us, and unless we are really conscientious and active in nurturing our own creativity. Honestly, when I was in, how I got into the work I do now is when I was in the corporate environment working for a large pharmaceutical company, I lost all creativity. It was such a stressful position for me. I stopped doing creative things outside of the work, and there was certainly no room for creativity in the work I did at that time. And I found myself just feeling like a shell of myself, and it was when I decided to, get rid of my television and replace it with an easel and a canvas, that I started feeling like, oh, this is, like I feel so much better just by taking time to paint and activating my creativity. And that's when I came up with this business. Like, okay, if this is how creativity is making me feel, I want more people to feel this way. So I started this business with this idea of I'm going to bring creativity back in the workplace. And at first, it was literally just that concept, like, I'm just going to see if companies will let me bring arts and crafts supplies in on a Friday afternoon and help people just activate their creativity. And the answer was no. Companies did not want that. But then I attached it to this idea of learning and development.
Mhm.
Using creativity in uh, in leadership development, team development. And and again, my whole concept was like, I just want people to use their hands, be creative, reactivate that creativity that we had when we were little kids. But what I found in doing this work is that when we use creativity in the workplace, what we're doing is we're allowing everyone to express that creativity again and to have a voice and to share their ideas in a way that makes sense to them. It became more than this idea of just arts and crafts in the workplace. It became a way to get people to reactivate that innate creativity that has always been there.
You said that your creativity died. Then you said you gave up TV,
Mhm.
A, and B, you bought an easel and some other arts and crafts related tools to reignite your creativity. Two important components of the story there that I'm going to break down in a moment and have us explore separately. But let me ask you this. How did you come to realize that the death of your creativity was what was killing you? And I ask that just to give this question a little bit of context. And y'all, anyone who is watching the show, please let me know if you can relate to this or know anyone like this. I certainly know some people who are like that, one of whom was me. You can go for years just sort of in this zombie-like state. There's this Donna Summer song from the 70s called Working the Midnight Shift. And in it, there's a lyric about her going night after night to work while she watches everyone else on the outside having fun. My body still carries on, goes the lyric, but I'm dying inside. How do you even recognize if you're dying inside, if you're living out that Donna Summer song?
I really feel that was because I stopped seeing myself, or like I would talk to people like, "Oh yeah, Bun, this is my impression of you." Like people I've known before, like, "Oh yeah, you're adventurous, you're creative, you're this, you're that," and I was like, "Who? Who are you talking about?" I can kind of recall who that was,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not me. So I think that was maybe the first recognition. And then I've
Wow.
always gone on these like interesting like healing journeys, and I think at
Mm-hmm.
that time I saw a um I don't wanna she wasn't a palm reader, she was like, I know so one thing she did was she was like, she identified like your power animal, things like that. So she was I don't know what you would call what she does, but so I went to see her and was talking to her um, and I was telling her how I was feeling, and she's like, "Oh, well, you need to, um, find yourself or heal yourself." I don't remember the words, and I was like, "I've heard that before." Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you heal yourself? How do you find yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Go back and just do the things that you love." And that's where I'm like, "Okay, well, I remember I love being creative." And that's when the TV went away and the easel came out. Right? So that was such a simple way for me to realize, like, because when you're in that space that you're talking about, you kind of have no idea what to do or where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And when people say, "Oh, you need to heal yourself," or "You need to, find yourself," who what does that even mean for someone in that position? So for her to say, "Remember what you love doing and do that." And, like, you don't have to there's not a mission or a goal, just do what you love.
I am so glad you raised that because those are terms that are so ambiguous. I just thought I was the only one that didn't understand.
I was like, "Thank you, I'll go heal myself now." Like,
Yeah, like how do you know when you're right? And find yourself. How do I know when I've been found? I've never understood. So, but this idea of remembering something that
yeah.
was lost really speaks to me. And that actually could be really practical advice for someone who might be watching this, who also has been secretly asking himself, how do I heal myself? What do I do? Like, that is an actual easy step that anyone can take, because we all, like you mentioned earlier, were kids and loved to do fun things. What were those fun things?
Yeah.
Bring your inner child back and start redoing them again. Let's get back to TV for a minute. TV is something that I have such ambivalence about, because on the one hand, at its height, which admittedly isn't achieved very often, but at its height, TV can be an exercise in creativity by people who are creators. I think about things like Star Trek, for instance, the original series. That was a hugely creative. Yeah. But on the other hand, in order for a creator to really experience the fruits of their creativity, some would argue, there have to be consumers. And TV has turned creativity into an art of consumption. And so I wonder your thoughts about, to some extent, whether TV itself, from a creative perspective, has crossed a line. Is there a place where creativity itself, or types of creativity, can become so rote that they really aren't creative at all, and they themselves can be an undoing of creativity through what started as the doing of creativity?
TV, there are some very, and movies too, there's a lot of creativity in that art form. And then, once I don't know, like, I feel like the monetization of it, the business behind it is like, oh, that went really well. Let's do more of that. Let's just create a framework on how to create these. What I go straight to is reality TV, right? This is a framework that works. It sucks people in, keeps
Yes.
them absorbed in this show, keeps them outside of their creativity, but guess what? We're making a lot of money. So let's just keep doing this. So yeah, I do feel like there's still a lot of creative art out there in that form. And there's also a lot of trash, to be honest, right? But I do feel like the like advancements in different social media channels has also allowed those of us who are not TV, filmmakers,
Yeah.
take on that type of creativity, or that type of, um, or we just have more access to being visible, like this, like, right, we're creating right now, and we're gonna be on TV, on YouTube. So in a sense, the evolution of it went from art and creativity to maybe just a framework of making money. But because of the advancements, it's now back to allowing more people different forms of creativity.
I never thought about this as being on TV. I am so glad you have those movie star looks, Vaughn. Medusa. Right. If you look like Medusa, you would never be on this show. You're fired.
I think that'd be pretty amazing, actually. The next one we do, I will be Medusa. I will put my hair. Yeah.
That would be so fun and creative. And maybe I would just like be frozen the whole time and see if I could hold it together.
Exactly.
Well, that being said, then, do you feel, because you're right, a lot of what is allegedly creative content, both on TV and on social media platforms, is trash. Do you feel like there is a moral obligation attached to tapping into your creativity to do something that uplifts or betters or is non-destructive? Or do you feel like, you know what, if your creative expression is, I don't know, putting out misinformation that's really beautifully done with cool artwork, or just flooding the world with reality TV trash, that's okay, you're still exercising your creativity? Do you have thoughts on that?
There's just so much to worry about in the world, right? And the fact that we are just, I mean, the world is small now because of social media, because of all these technological advancements. And I've had to sort of pull myself away from it and be like, okay, let me just focus on my neighborhood. Right. And let me just focus on what I can control, like my family, like raising my child, running my business. And yeah, literally, like, what's going on in my community, because it all becomes too much. So so I can say, like, I think I have a moral obligation to use my creativity in the way that I feel serves a bigger purpose than making me money. Um, but I'm not ready to say other people have that moral obligation.
You raise underneath that an important point, which is that sometimes we are too quick to judge the motivations or the impacts or the implications of the exercise of creativity by others. This art is bad, so let's ban it. This book is immoral and it's full of sin, so let's remove it from libraries. And this decision to focus on yourself and you meeting your own moral, ethical standards, honestly, perhaps super trashy reality TV. And when I was in my worst points in my executive life, reality TV that was really low and garbage was all that I could mentally handle.
Right.
I needed it, right? And you're right. Like, who are any of us to judge the needs of other people because we haven't walked in their shoes?
Although, I mean, I'm not perfect. Trust me. We were joking before, like, we don't judge out loud.
Right. Oh, you called me out on my own show. That's both creative and kind of ballsy too. I respect it.
Which I am both of, but both those things.
Hey, that's what being an entrepreneur is. You also said then, after you got rid of TV, that you pulled out the easel and you began to actually do these things.
Yeah.
Were you concerned that beginning to engage in these these creative exercises would somehow start to pull you away from the focus that you needed to continue in your job? And if so, how did you deal with that?
I did not think of that at all. I really was just like, this is like my job was not my concern, right? Like I did well in my job. It was more like, how do I enjoy life more? How do I enjoy this existence more? And like, as you started talking about the easel, me pulling all the art stuff out, what really came to me was not so much about how it impacted my work, but this idea of failure, right? So like this idea of failure. Because I remember it very specifically, like, as I started painting whatever it was I was painting, I don't think I even knew. I just started putting paint to the canvas. Oh, it was a landscape. And I just remember, like, as I was painting, like, this is gross. Like, this is so ugly. Like, I'm no good at this. But then just this idea of keep going, right? So I just kept painting and it ended up being a really, I mean, in my mind, for a beginning painter, pretty good painting. And what that taught me was this idea of trusting the process. And anything you begin is probably not going to look great when you first start.
Yeah.
But don't quit. Just keep going. And then later on in my, in the work I'm doing now, I learned this process called the creative problem solving process. And part of that creative problem solving process is this concept of creative chaos. And I realize now, going back to that painting, is like, oh, that's what I was experiencing. Creative chaos, which is you start something, excited about it, and then you you start going, and then there's gonna be at some point where that painting doesn't look great, or like this thing you started is getting complicated. No one understands you. It's getting hard. That's creative chaos. And a lot of times what people will do is they get to creative chaos and they make a U-turn. And like, well, let's just go back to the way I've always done things. Let's just go back to the ways I know I don't feel good here, but I'm just going to keep doing this. But what I found in this painting process is that when you keep going, despite how messy it gets, on the other side is something better.
A lot of the people watching this video are going to be in professions: architects, engineers, lawyers, accountants, doctors, similar sorts of things, or C-suite positions where there is a lot of pressure to make sure that, of course, you follow through with things, but that you follow through with things in a way that's right. Right. Like, you cannot be creative. You can be creative in legal argumentations, but when it comes to actually how that creativity is executed, you have to follow certain rules to the letter, like grammatical rules or legal citation rules or those sorts of things. Otherwise, you're rear end will get slammed. What I'm hearing in this is that it takes a radical break from that sort of mindset to embrace the truly chaotic part of it, and really shaking through that fear of failure that you might have after years of being afraid that if you cited a case wrong, right, you could end up losing big for your client or something like that. Do you find it to be a common struggle for people in those positions to embrace that chaos? And what do you tell them when you see them struggling with embracing that chaos, if that indeed is something that you observe?
I'll refer back to the program you and I did.
For the New York City Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings.
Yes. Okay. So here I am, like, with my crayons and my Lego, and joining Scott, who's a attorney, a lawyer by training, and um and yeah, you're right. So those are a group of people who, you have to do things a certain way. Or you could lose a lot, right? And then again, we were talking about them not being used to failure. So when I talk to people in those roles, like, they're made, and we talk about, like, creative leadership, creative problem-solving tools. Like, creative leadership, creative problem-solving isn't always the tool you can use, right? Especially when you're in a position like that. So, but when you think about, like, where could you use it? I mean, even in roles like that, there's places, like maybe how you lead people. How can you get more creative in that area? Um, and it's the same message though, because if you're not used to being creative, you're not used to that process of of failure, or what looks like failure, and then pushing through it, it can be really difficult, which is what we talk to them about. Um, and I just say follow that same process, right? Like, so whenever you're able to start something new, do something creative, just always know 100% of the time you're going to face creative chaos. It may look like just a small little bump in the road, or it may look like a whole mess. But whatever it looks like, know it's gonna be there, and that's when you have to cue yourself and pause. It's like, "Okay, I am trying, this is my goal, I'm trying to do something different, trying to be a better leader," whatever it might be. So I'm just gonna push through this. And again, just like that painting, trust that process.
I am so glad that you mentioned that program that we did together for that group of hearing officers and administrative law judges. For those who are not familiar with Vaughn through other channels, and she'll share what those channels are later, Vaughn and I have worked together on a number of different creativity-based projects together for years now. And I won't lie, I started working with you just because I like you. I think you're fun. And you're smart, right? So, like, who wouldn't want to work with you who's not crazy? Well, I'm not crazy, so I wanted to work with you. And I have found the experience to generally be fun. But I've learned so much by observing your talking about this process and this messiness over and over and over again, that has spilled outside of my work-a-day concerns and into my personal life. This show here at the Myth Slayer Café is called Myths, Leadership, and Life. And what you're talking about is also been applicable in my own lived experience as learning sometimes to embrace and accept chaos, even destruction in my own life. And it's helped me. Although I didn't walk into our working relationship together seeking that. And that's something that I'm curious as to whether you have thoughts on, whether you have observed that elsewhere, because life can be crazy, and in so many interpersonal situations, or in day-to-day non-work situations, problems are caused by the desire to control process or the desire to control outcomes. Embracing chaos. Look, if I'm having a chaotic day with my family, sometimes just embracing that and saying that's part of it might be better than, I don't know, throwing a hissy fit.
And that's the thing I really value about this work is, teaching people the tools and the mindset of creative leadership, creative problem solving really impacts us in all areas of our lives. Um, and uh, and for me, it's been such a powerful lesson, because I'm I'm highly controlling and I can catastrophize things. We've talked about that too. Like, oh my gosh, this one little thing happened. It's a catastrophe.
Yeah.
So a couple of things like creative leadership, clearly like these tools of creative leadership have helped me. I started doing some reading or watching some podcasts on Kabbalah and Stoicism, which has really helped as well, in the sense that, you know, they look at anything that happens as just a circumstance, right? It's like something happens, but then we as human beings, because of our perspective, maybe because of things that have happened to our past, we put meaning on that circumstance. And when we put meaning to that circumstance, then we create all these feelings around it. Like, this is horrible, this is bad, I'm catastrophizing things. But in Kabbalah and then in Stoicism, it's like, we can't judge what happens to us in the moment. We have no idea what value it might bring to us in the future. So, and I think it ties into creativity and creative thinking, because creative thinking really makes us adaptable. And all those things together recently, really fairly recently in my life, has helped me to look at situations that I might initially be like, this is bad. And like, I don't know. Right? Maybe this happened for a reason. Maybe 6 months down the line, I'm going to see like, oh, that actually happened for me, not to me.
I'm so glad you mentioned this. In the pre-show, you and I had an interesting conversation in which I raised some recent business challenges that I had. And during that set of business challenges, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what if things never get better? Why is this happening to me? And I was catastrophizing too. This is the end of the world. What if I end up broke? What if I end up on the streets? All of this sort of stuff. And it wasn't until it was over and things suddenly turned around more dramatically, that I had the clarity to look back and say, this dark period really was happening for me, because it forced me to confront a lot of the inner stories that I was telling myself. And it also, as we mentioned during our pre-call, forced me to change my spiritual practices and look at the role, since you mentioned Stoicism in particular, of my ego, putting expectations, financial expectations, outcome expectations on my day-to-day. I saw not that long ago an interview with a reporter who had a near-death experience, and he said that doors that shut in your life, he learned through his near-death experience, are actually acts of mercy. We just can't see them at the time. The real challenge is, for me at least, and if anyone in the audience can relate to this at all, please remark so in the comments, is just making it through to that point. Do you feel like even figuring out how to make it through that point can be an act of creativity, Vaughn?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's a mindset shift, right? And to have that mindset shift, you do have to look at things differently, pull from different experience, and maybe not your own, and pull from different resources. For me, like listening to things like this, podcasts have really helped me get out of my own head and my own thoughts and see things from a different perspective. And that's what creativity is. Like, how can I take my experience, but see it from a different perspective? Yeah, it's been, and and what you said too brings me back to this idea of energy. Another thing I've been looking at is like this level of energy. So when you were saying from, when we both, like last year, I was like, okay, like what is going on here? I think people were nervous, like the work we're in consulting. I think people were nervous about like bringing people on.
Yeah.
So it was a time where we could have really, and we, like you said, you started catastrophizing, and and even in that space, rather than staying there, if we could elevate our energy. So this is another thing I've been looking at, like a little bit off topic, but this idea of, if I want something in particular, like let's say I want to, live in Hawaii. Yet, like what's the energy of that? Like, what do I need to do for my energy to make that happen? There's this woman named 𝗵𝗵𝗻𝗻. I've been listening to some of her work, and she says, and she made this analogy, like if you want to watch Discovery Channel, but you're constantly clicking on CNN, it's like how are you ever going to watch the Discovery Channel? So when you think about like how do you want to live your life, like what results were you looking for when you're in that place where things weren't going your way? Thinking rather than like living in there, thinking about like, okay, what do I want for myself, right? How do I, what's the vision for myself? And then live in that energy rather than this energy of I'm in the dumps, right? And that's how we get to that energy. That's how we get from CNN to the Discovery Channel.
Fascinating. During that dark period, a spiritual guide that I had been working with sent me a random DM saying he was thinking of me and really pointed to a lot of the mental energy that he was suspecting that I was feeling, and he was uncannily accurate, I have to admit, was holding me in this space. And you are right, by calling me out on that and by shifting my spiritual energy into a place that was focused on embodying my highest self and the opportunities that I want to have come, I was shifting that internal story that you referenced earlier, that was bringing about, right? It's just obvious when you think about it. It's not even really that woo-woo. If you're walking around being negative and desperate, people sense those emotions, and they're going to react accordingly. Whereas if you are focused on embodying something better, if you're focused on embodying the Discovery Channel rather than CNN and all of that, then you're right. You're going to, that's what you're going to become.
Like we're magnets. I think it's more like when you said like it's not woo, it literally is not woo. It's science, right? When you think about the world as energy and frequency, so if we're living in a certain frequency, that's what we'll attract.
What can be hard for people, and I had to work with someone on, I would love to hear your personal experience here, Vaughn, was figuring out, well, what is this highest self that I want? Sometimes it's obvious. Like around early 2024, I started having these visions in my mind of the next place that I would live in. And it's been remarkably consistent. And I literally can see myself in this home. Now, when I have been in a place of apathy or psychological Hades, that kind of disappears. But when I shift my narrative, it manages to come out. When I focus on embodying my highest self, I can see that home much more clearly because that's where my highest self would be. What is your practice, or what tips can you give for figuring out exactly what channel it is that you want to watch if you're sick and tired of all the people screaming at each other on CNN?
Yeah. So again, it's like one of those things like, oh, heal yourself, right? Like what is that? Like, how do you find that energy? I think it goes back to, the same thing, doing what you love, or something that I have found that's helped me is when I get into this place where I'm like, okay, I'm not living at the frequency I want to be living in, I go back to curiosity, right? Like, okay, so like, how might I? What can I watch? What can I do in this moment to get me back to that level? And for me, oftentimes it's instead of choosing to watch, I don't know, like some trash TV or some gossipy YouTube channel, which I do love to watch.
Love that you're keeping it real.
Yes. But honestly, it is sometimes like, oh, I'm going to watch this because there's some gossip I want to hear about. I mean, it's so ridiculous, right? Or am I going to choose the podcast that's going to teach me something and elevate my frequency? And it's in those curious choices that we make that help us get back up there. And not to say there are some moments where, like you were saying, like when you're in your darkest time, it might have just taken, like you just needed to watch that trash TV. Right. There's a time for everything. I'm not, trust me, like I could call my son in here right now. He could tell you the same thing. Mama's not always living at her highest frequency.
Yeah, people can say that about me too.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, sometimes my choice is like, okay, am I going to choose this? This to watch is going to put me at a higher frequency, or am I going to choose the gossip? I'm like, 10 minutes of gossip isn't going to kill anybody.
Am I going to wallow in the mud today? Well, it's funny. I was thinking as we're talking about trash TV, for a while I was obsessed with this TV show called The Swan. And for anyone, if you've watched
that show, it's horrible. That was horrible.
Okay, so if you have watched The Swan, be honest, audience. You can confess in the comments. We won't.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, The Swan was this show about these women that were, by social metrics, not any objective facts, just people's opinions, unattractive. And they went through this huge mass of plastic surgery. And then after their plastic surgery, they were allegedly beautiful. And then they had a beauty contest at the end to see who was the swan. It is low. It is awful. And as I think about my own goal to tap into creativity and fully embody myself in the best way possible, I look back on every single moment that I spent watching The Swan and I judge myself. And you're talking about, when it comes to messy creativity, not judging yourself. But maybe I'm also going to take that a little bit further and say, when we do sink to our lowest selves and we watch The Swan, maybe we shouldn't judge that either, but examine what that was really about. Do you have any thoughts, any additional advice for someone like me stuck watching The Swan for season after season?
I can't imagine anyone, again, people who are watching, put in the comments if you've always chosen your higher self, right? I would love to meet you and learn from you.
Right.
I think my only comment on that is this idea of discipline. Right. So, and I don't mean not like disciplining a child, but like having self-discipline and balance. So I think like we are humans, that we are spiritual beings in these human bodies, and we make these choices. So what I have been able to do for myself with practice is discipline. Right. So okay, YouTube looks all these choices. I can choose the higher choice. I can choose that. Just like trash TV for a little while. I'm gonna give myself 15 minutes, right? I'm gonna give myself 15 minutes. But it's harder than you think, because as you know, these things are designed to suck you in for hours. So if you don't think you have that discipline, maybe stay away. But yeah, just like finding small ways to discipline yourself, to practice self-discipline. For example, for something that I do, and it has to be small steps, because I was working with a little group coaching cohort, and I was saying, like, I'm so good at saying yes and to other people, and then meeting the deadlines, whatever it is. If I am responsible for someone else, accountable to someone else, you better believe I'm going to be on time or early for anything that I commit to you. And when it comes to me and my commitments to myself, I have a long history of failing. And I was like, how do I change that? I don't want to be that person. I want to be as accountable to myself as I am to everyone else out there. So what it came to for me is like, I expect so much of myself. Like, I'm like, okay, my morning routine is I'm going to get up, I'm going to work out, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to do gratitude. I was like, there's like 7 things on my morning routine. And so for me, I was like, oh, well, why don't I just practice what I preach? I'm just going to do one, right? I'm going to hone down on in my morning routine to just commit to one thing. And if some of those other things happen, then great. But if not, at least I've done that one thing. And that's how you grow discipline in your life, right? Don't start with all of it. And maybe it's not every single day, but start with one thing you can commit to, a small thing you can commit to that you can continually do, and then expand on that. I think a couple of things, what that does is, number one, if you can make that commitment as small as possible so you can actually reach it, you build the muscle and you build the confidence that I can be committed, I can follow through. And then you'll do more. Because what was happening in my life was I was making all these commitments to myself, never accomplishing it. And then how'd that make me feel? It made me feel lower frequency. It made me watch the bad things on YouTube, right? So like you give yourself the win, like make it so easy for yourself to win.
Talking about developing that confidence to lean into your creativity with discipline, it takes us back to one final thing that I'd like us to talk about in more detail related to Daedalus, which is the story of his son, Icarus. So Daedalus obviously had the confidence in his creativity to put together these wing-like structures and attach bird feathers to them using wax so that the two of them could escape their imprisonment. But Daedalus had the discipline to keep flying in a straight path and not get overwhelmed and overly excited by the brightness of the sun. Icarus, in tragic contrast, got overwhelmed and flew too close, and as we mentioned earlier, horrifically passed away. The story of Icarus is usually interpreted through the lens of arrogance. He was overly confident in his ability to fly as the embodiment of creativity and the confidence associated with it. Hearing everything that you've just had to say, I can't help but see Icarus as symbolically a part or a child of Daedalus's creative confidence, represented confidence unconstrained by ego and suffering a fall because of it. And Daedalus, as allegorically the father of this part of his creativity, had to live the rest of his life in misery over that loss. You mentioned Stoicism earlier, which is also heavily focused on constrainment of the ego. How do you know, Vaughn, if your development of confidence in your creativity has stepped into ego, or do you feel there is a relationship between ego and creativity and any danger associated with it at all?
In a practical sense, for the people watching and for, in the terms of leadership, this concept of creative leadership, creativity in the workplace, really it's designed to counteract that ego, because it's all about collaboration. Like, how do we not only how do we only use creativity to find different ideas from our own different perspectives, and then also look around us and realize that every single person in this room, every single person in this organization has their own set of ideas, perspectives, unique backgrounds that we can draw from. So putting our egos aside and being able to hear from other people's perspectives to come up with the best ideas to move forward. So yes, I think as human beings, right, I think it's really easy to let our egos take over, and there are things that we can do and mindsets we can take on to make sure that, again, like especially in the workplace, to make sure that we're not letting that take a hold of ourselves. That we're constantly looking, again, opening up that perspective and looking outwards for other ideas, for other people's creativity.
Vaughn, there have been so many topics that we have covered today in a conversation that I can only describe as rich. I am almost at a loss of words as to think which of these points, which by the way include both the very practical and the philosophical, is that single takeaway that I will carry with me going forward above and beyond everything else, because I'm going to carry everything else with me. But one thing that's sort of really landing right now is what you said earlier. If you are living a life that feels dead, in which you think you've lost your creativity, step back and remember who you were as a kid and the things that you loved, even if they seem childish. There's this Bible verse, set childish things aside and become an adult, or something like that. With all due respect to the Bible, I'm not totally down with that. Embrace those childish things sometimes. That's my big takeaway, and something I'm really glad that you brought to the fore. If there is one final thing that you would like to say that you didn't get to so far, or if there is a single thing that you would like the audience to take away from this conversation, what might that be?
So I'm going to go back to the Daedalus story about the wings and him building those wings. And I think what comes to me is this idea that, curiosity and creativity allow you to build wings, right? Allow you to discover new things, build possibilities for yourself and for others. But in Daedalus building it for others, his son, and even though he warned him, what it really brings me is like you can teach people these creative skills, you can share it with them, but you can't do it for them. Right, because that could lead to disasters. Or you can't force it upon people. But if you follow your own curiosity, it will always lead to new possibilities, and you can discover your own wings.
What a poetic way to end a fabulous conversation. Thank you, Vaughn.
Thank you, Scott.
I know for a fact that people are going to want to learn more about you after they watch this show. And your links are in the caption right below. But Vaughn, just spell out for us right now where people can go and tell us about some projects that you've recently done or that you have coming up.
Sure. Okay, so come find me on LinkedIn. As Scott knows, I live there. Right? I'm there all the time sharing all sorts of information. So please follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also find out more about my work in leadership development, team development, speaking engagements on my website, worksmartadvantage.com. I also have a YouTube channel, not as robust as this one, but I do share little snippets of the content I share, the tools I use in creative leadership, and that's at Work Smart Advantage. And I just recently spoke at South by Southwest.
Yeah.
Sharing my book, What If Pigs Can Fly? A Practical Guide to Following Your Curiosity to Achieve Impractical Possibilities.
So impressive. And is it true you've done a TEDx too?
I have, as you have. I have done a TEDx talk, and that's where you can hear more about my mom's story, the whole story. And that TEDx talk is called What If? The Life-Changing Power of Curiosity.
And I wanted to explicitly mention that because your mom's story really is deeply affecting, as is that entire TEDx.
Thank you.
Vaughn, it has truly been a pleasure having you today here at the Myth Slayer Café. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me, Scott.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to press the thumbs up below and leave some remarks in the comments beneath the caption. And then never forget, please, to press that subscribe button. I want you to be the first to hear about new episodes that we have coming out. In addition, if you have particular mythical figures that you want to know more about, particularly from a leadership perspective, or if you have leadership questions or comments of any sort, do not hesitate to connect with me or with Vaughn for that matter, using all of the social links and the contact information that you see in the captions. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Myth Slayer Café. And do not ever forget, I want your future to be epic.